And I knew that I was in his heart and not in his presence. I was in his heart. And he spoke to me and he said, ask me whatever you will. And Jim and I had needed something for like 10 years that we'd been praying for. And so I asked for it. 3 days later, we had been praying for years for this. 3 days later, I had it. 3 days later. And I said, God, that's really cool, but can you show me that in the Word? And he took me to John 15. If you abide in me and I abide in you, ask whatever you will and it shall be given to you. But idolatry is not what you think. Idolatry can be, okay, for me, when I was in college, and I was a freshman, sophomore, junior, and I had one more term to go, and I was a senior. And I loved it because, you know, I got anywhere from a 3.5 to a 4 and I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I was really succeeding and doing beautifully. And then the Lord said, I want you to quit. Excuse me, God, are you talking to me? Do you realize that in one more term, I'm a senior? Do you realize you didn't ask me not to go to college when I was a freshman. You're asking when I'm almost a senior, when I can see the end? And he said, I want you to quit. And I said, well, God, you're going to need to confirm this. And the phone rang. I had 2 phone calls, and I don't know which one came first. It's been too many years ago. But Sandy remembers Brenda Maddox. She was one of the telephone calls. Dave and Brenda Maddox, do you remember them? So anyway, she was one of the phone calls. She goes, Maggie, what are you doing in school? God just told me you're supposed to quit. And the other one, I got down, I said, okay, God, I need confirmation. I already had one, and that was pretty, miraculous. And the phone rang again, and it was Julie Saunders, who had gone to the church with us. And she said the same thing, Maggie, I'm really getting it, you're supposed to quit. So I quit, and then I had a dream that the lion and a lioness were roaming through the house, and they were going to try to talk me into going back to college, and that I was to resist. Well, I love college. I loved college. If I could have been a forever student, I would have been. I loved college. So I spent one term out, and then I said, well, I want to go back. And so I couldn't get into WASC, so I called Lynn Benton, went there. Now, here's the thing. I went to Lynn Benton. I met a man named Max Lieberman, who was Jewish. He was not a Christian. And in my first day of his class, oh my gosh, he was using profanity like you wouldn't believe, including the F word. And hating everybody, hating his family, hating this, hating that. And people were walking out, but I couldn't walk out because, like, if he was talking to you guys like this, I was sitting one over from Christy, and the door was over there. So I would have had, no, wait a minute, the door was over here, because I would have had to cross him. And I thought, no way am I crossing him, because 2 people walked out, and he made comments to him. Go ahead and walk out, see if I care. And I was like, oh my God. So the class gets done, and I'm booking it to the office to drop that class. And God says, I want you to stay. But God, did you hear him? God says, I want you to stay. He's told me he was Jewish. I want to have you reach him and everything else. Max and I became very close. I love Max. He put on a show for the people because they were freshmen and sophomores, and stuff. He just wanted to reach them. Yeah, he was doing wrong, but that wasn't his heart. That wasn't who he was. Max and I became close, and I got a 4. Doesn't that prove that I'm doing good? I'm witnessing to a Jewish guy, and I get a 4, the best you can get. That's confirmation if things go well, isn't it? Not God's way. Not God's way. Yes, I was still blessed because he blesses me, but I was in disobedience. So I went back to WASC the next term thinking, that's great. It's going good. I go back to WASC. Every time God told me to quit, it was in the middle of midterms. So I'm in midterms, and God's saying, I want you to quit, I want you to quit, I want you to quit. And I said, okay, and I quit. He just started putting on me. So the same thing. I quit for one term. I want to go back. I go back to Lynn Benton the next term, I meet Max again. I have him. I love him. We get even closer. And 4-point again, and I'm helping witness to him, and I'm witnessing to other people that are in this class about God. And it's just as great as it can get. And then I go back to WASC, and God says, I want you, you know. So now I'm back for the third time. And on the third time, back and forth, well, guess what I look like to my family now? I look like an idiot. I look like a nut because I'm going to school, I'm quitting. God told me to quit, you know, and then I go back, and then, you know, I'm doing really good and I'm all excited, and then God tells me to quit, and I'm telling them God told me to quit. And it looks, what they thought of me, the opinion flips, you know. Now I'm back at Western, and I have a dream. And in the dream, I'm on the second story of a 2-story house, an old house, and the waves are coming up and they're hitting the house. And it's a very horrific storm. And I'm upstairs talking to this man. I said, who's the nut that built their house upon the sand? And he said, don't worry about it. It's been here for a long time. And I woke up. So I go to class. I have an 8 o'clock test. And then I'm back and I'm studying from 9 to 10 for a 10 o'clock test. And that dream is boom, 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 and I'm pushing it out. I refuse to listen. I got to test. I got to do good. Boom, boom, boom. I can't study. It is so strong on me that I cannot study. And I finally threw my book down and I said, okay, God, if this is you, what do you want? Because I'm frustrated. I know I was wrong. You don't have to tell me. I already know. But immediately the Lord spoke to me, and he spoke audibly. And he gave me Matthew 7, about the house being built on the sand or building your house on the rock. And then he spoke audibly to me. And he said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Broke my heart. I go, oh my gosh, God, I'm done. I don't ever care if I go back to school. I quit, but now I quit because my heart's in line with God. He reached me. And I quit. That was idolatry. I put that college before obeying God. With Miles, it was him wanting to go into the Guard. He was doing the same thing. He was pushing and driving, but I didn't feel it was right. I felt that it was the same thing as the college. And I finally reached him after a few months, you know, and said, it's not that God doesn't want you there. I mean, I went back and finished. I have one class. I have enough credits to be a graduate, but I have one class. I don't care, you know. But with Miles, it was the Guard. With Christy, it was clothes shopping. She had to buy clothes all the time. You know, she'd be working and just boom, a drawer. And she had to, God spoke. I mean, we spoke to her and it finally broke. But that's what I'm saying about idolatry. Idolatry, sometimes we don't recognize. I didn't recognize that college could be idolatrous, you know, or Miles, you know, or Christy. But idolatry can be something that we put before God that can seem innocent, that's not a sin. I mean, it's not a sin to go to college, it's a good thing. But it was idolatry to me, and God was trying to break that. So anyway, even with my grumbling, I started grumbling about the thing. Why are we still going through all this? We've won the battle. And Christy's heart was racing, and she was upstairs. It was the 4th time. And I talked to God, and I said, God, I am so sorry. You know, I said, I give you my word. Because I had let my boat kind of drift a little bit, you know. Just a little. I was still strong, but I had shrunk back from God a little bit because I was so weary from the F5. I was so weary from battling the enemy, you know, that I was still serving God, but I had shrunk back just enough and was being disobedient and grumbling just enough that it was an open door. When I repented and said, God, I'm back and I give you my word. I'm back to praying 3 hours. I'm back to your word, whatever your word says. And Christy yelled from upstairs. I got done praying and repenting and saying, God, I'm sorry. And I just turned over to go to sleep. And Christy yells from upstairs. My heart just went back. Because our disobedience, anybody that knows the right thing to do and does not do it, it is sin to that person. Anything other than faith is sin. I mean, we don't think of that. But I was walking in sin just enough to open up the door to the enemy. And so that's what God has shown me. You know, the same thing with healing. That enemy is triumphed over. Every time Satan comes to our house and tries to hit us, except for the times that, we allow, no, you're triumphed over. I don't care how big you think you are. I don't care whether you're one witch or 10,000 witches, you're defeated. I've had, and I don't know if I shared this with you, I've had the sky filled, Sherry, from Lucifer's Daughters up in Portland. I've had this guy filled with demonic forces. She came and wanted me to fight her after I'd already won her. And I said, no, I don't have to. I'm redeemed. You're defeated. I stood on that he has triumphed over them. And she wanted me to fight her. I said, no, I don't have to. I'm redeemed. You're defeated. And she pressed, and I repeated it. And she pressed, and I started singing, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." And she pressed one more time, and I sang it even louder. "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus," went to sleep. I didn't have to fight her. In fact, if I had fought her, I would have invited a big war. Then she came back the next week, and she had my daughter Candy, my third child. Candy's not saved yet. And she had her dangling. I said, no. You're already defeated. Now leave. And Candy, I've already stood in faith for her. She's mine. I don't care what it looks like. Now get out of here. And she did. And that was the end of it. But that it was standing on that they are triumphed over. Knowing that I'm redeemed. Knowing that in him I am complete. So I wanted to bring that to you because sometimes, and for everybody really, this is the thing. Christy always thought that she had a special battle going on. That it was Sherry and Lucifer's Daughters against Christy, and we were just innocent bystanders, and we didn't understand. But according to the Word of God, it says that it is common to man. All this ordeal that the Israelites went through with Moses. Right here. No temptation is overtaking you, but such is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted but what you're able. But with the temptation will come a way of escape. And there's another place where it says it's common to man. We all have an enemy that's trying to do us in. Whether it's subtly or whether it's strong, it doesn't matter. How do we think that we've had two people a couple weeks ago that walked away from God? One was a member of Hillsong. Did you guys hear about that? The Hillsong guy, one of the worship leaders, and the guy that wrote the book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye. Both those people have denounced their faith in the past. Well, they did it in the same week, but it's been a couple weeks. Both of them walked away from God. Jim walked away from God. My ex-husband walked away from God, serving the enemy. How does that happen? Because it happens through our thought life. It happens through our compromise. It happens through getting those thoughts and not taking them captive. Do not be, how does that say? See to it that no one take you captive. Through philosophy, empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world. We have that, we have that assignment not to let Satan deceive us. Ephesians 6, be strong in the Lord and the power of his might so that you can resist the schemes of the devil. We're to know the schemes of the devil. And most of the church, I know you guys do, but most of the church doesn't even believe in him. Doesn't, even that woman, that witch that came up that said she was going to pray against Trump and get all the witches together to come against Trump. I know a pastor that's of a big church who said, yeah, I know she said that, but she's not really a witch because there's no such thing, And if I told you who he was, every one of you in here know him. In fact, if I mentioned the city, you would know him because he's well known around here. But even with her proclaiming it and saying this is her assignment, he still doesn't believe it because he doesn't believe there's such a thing. Who do you think Satan defeated on the cross? It was Satan. He has followers the same way Jesus has followers, us. And people are blinded to it. They don't want to believe it. But Satan works either slightly, I shouldn't say that on microphone. But there's another gentleman that has fallen into sin. I don't know if you guys heard about just recently with that in the past week. He'd been in gross sin in 2008, and he's in trouble again. But my point is they bow their knee. They don't stand firm. And standing firm is against the enemy, but it's also against other things. My dad went to the hospital and, before he passed away, and he went through where he was supposed to have died. And I said, no, that's not what I believe. I have a promise for him. He will not die, but live. And I said it to the doctor, and the doctor kind of, okay, well. And the next day, my dad came out of it. And so I told my dad, God brought you out, and he's not saved yet, but I'm praying for him. I believe he's already saved. And he said, well, I don't know about that. And then he nosedived the next day. My daughter, he nosedived the next day, and here's what happened. Satan, in the middle of the night at 5 o'clock in the morning, gave me a dream and tried to get me to step into immorality. It was a sexual dream and tried to get me to step into sin. And I said no, even in the dream. I said no, and I struggled against it, and I came against Satan in the dream. It took 3 minutes, and I woke up, and I'd won the battle. Go back to the hospital that morning, and they said, your dad's heart was fibrillating. Now, there's two sides. On the one side, it's not dangerous. On the other side, it is. And he said it was the dangerous one, and they called that code, whatever it is, where everybody rushes, the doctors and nurses from both floors. Is that what it is? So they called code blue on my dad. And they came down, they watched his heart, and it was in danger, and they didn't know. They thought he was going to die, and they were all prepared to slap him with the stuff, in case anything happened. And they said it only lasts for 3 minutes, and then they said it just quit on its own, and we don't even know why. But it was a strange thing, so we're watching him. What time was it? 5 o'clock? And then Harold prophesied over me just a few days later that I had stood against the enemy. The enemy had tried to hit me and everything, but I had stood against it and won the victory. So now he's doing really good again. And now my other daughter and her husband come in and they visit him, and he's all energized because, there's been stress in the family, and stuff. And he wears himself out. And so the next day, he's not waking up. And the doctor can't get him to wake up. And the doctor said, this doesn't look good. He's slipping away. And I said, that's not what I believe. I said, God told me he's going to be healed. And I said, he's going to walk out of this hospital just fine. The doctor looked at me, kind of shrugged his shoulders, finished what he was doing, and then walked out. The nurse came over to me and said, right in my face, your dad is slipping away. You need to prepare yourself. You need to accept it, and you need to prepare yourself for it. And I just because she had a spirit in it. And I backed up, and I said, kind of shaken, and said, that's not what I believe. And then I went home and said, God, help. I'm standing in faith. And God said, sow seed into this person that also got hit, and stand in faith. So I go back to the hospital the next day. And it's a long hospital. It was long. It was like double this. It was in building A and on the top floor. And I look and I see my dad at the other end, but it looks kind of funny and I can't figure out what's going on. And as I get closer, not only is my dad not slipping away, but he had, those recliners that they push behind people that are in their room, those big, that was behind him. And he had walked half that hall and was on his way back and almost to his room. It was that recliner that I saw that I couldn't figure out what it was. And my dad was totally restored. And then we went in, and Christy Miles and I, and said, Dad, or he said to me, he said, I thought I was a goner. Now I know I'll make it. And I said, well, let's tell you why you made it. And so we shared with him how we had stood in faith, how we'd had people praying, what the doctor had said. He was supposed to die. But our faith and God's faithfulness, healed him. And he just didn't say a word. He just looked. He was thinking. He was contemplating it. My brother came in that night and said, Dad, do you believe in... And before Ronnie could even get it out of his mouth, my dad stretched out his hands and said, yes, I do, and accepted Jesus. And so 2 weeks later, my dad went home to be with the Lord. But that's what I'm saying. It's not just against turning our heart and mind. We're to guard our heart and our minds. You guys know that, right? I mean, the Word of God says, guard your heart and your mind. And the peace of God will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. We're to guard our heart. We're to watch over our heart with all diligence, for from it flows the springs of life. So we don't realize that the enemy is out there trying to turn our heart with thoughts, with people, with loved ones, homosexuality. Someone's against it, like Cheney, and then all of a sudden his daughter, he finds out is one, and so he kind of softens a little bit. We can't do that. We can't let circumstances. The thing to do in that case is not to change your heart. I get it. We love our family, but we're not to turn our heart. We're to stand in faith for them, because God says you and your household shall be saved. It's a promise. And with healings or with Henry, no, it's already done. We don't believe we're healed when we see it. We believe it because, by his stripes we are healed. 1 Peter, is it 1 Peter or 2 Peter? 1 Peter 2:24, by his stripes we were healed. And so it's already done. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share, the importance. We have really taken as our foundations Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 9, where it says, everybody's in a race, all the way through 10, through the end, and then Ephesians 6. And then sometimes we go to Hebrews and Colossians and the other ones to support it. But every time we don't just read through it, we speak the truth. We get it into our hearts, and how to do it, and just getting that in there. And I have seen a horrific change in Christy and Miles in the past 2 months by us doing that. It's not that they were bad or before, or what I'm saying, but they've become stronger. They're able to do it now without mom. You know what I'm saying? Before I was like the main thrust of, okay, they got a problem, mom. Now it's them doing it and coming with the testimony saying, look how I stood. Look how I'm able to do it. So, but really that's for all of us, because God says in the end days, even the elect would be deceived if it were possible. It's time that we pick it up and we become strong in the Lord, that we really buckle down and believe his word. What his word says is true, not what we see, feel, hear, taste, or the other emotions. But, you know what I'm saying, huh? Yeah, the 5 emotions. But really, like that dream God gave me, stepping back, what a different perspective. And not stopping at the first thing that you think of, but making sure all the pieces of the puzzle are put into place so that we can see clearly. It's putting the whole puzzle together, not beating the air, not just go, okay, that's what's happening, let me start coming against this, or running in a way without aim, not knowing where we're going, but not beating the air, having self-control in all things, realizing, wait a minute, we're running this race, we're not just going to run it, we're going to run it to win. Yeah, we're going to be the first one across that finish line. We're going to be strong in God. We're not going to be, okay, we're making it in God. No, we're going to be strong in God. We're going to be the powerhouse God created us to be. And so I don't know. Hopefully it was a good word for you guys. And so anyway, Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 9 and 10, Ephesians 6, Colossians, and Hebrews. And because Hebrews tells us in 10:35, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you've done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. For yet in a little while he who is coming will come, and he will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those that shrink back to destruction, but we are of those who have faith to the preserving of the soul. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for. And really, the one thing that Kenneth Copeland helped me on was he said something. He said, how would you like to say to your wife or to your husband, I believe you, and I love you. No, it was, I love you. I just don't believe anything you say. He said, well, how would that work? And how can we tell God, I love you, and then not believe anything he says? In fact, God took me back, and I'll share this and then it'll be over. Back in 94-ish, Jim was having trouble, and I was getting angry, really angry, because it was bad. And the Lord took me and he read Job to me. He spoke it audibly. He goes, but where were you? Who do you think you are? Where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? And I got off the bed and onto the floor, and I just got down. And he said, you leave him alone. I'll take care of him. I said, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I did. I repented. About a week later, I was reading through all the words where you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. And I was reading that, and the more scriptures I read, the truth of that was just coming upon me, and God's presence was coming upon me. And it was just like awesome because God was in it. And I thought, it's too difficult. I mean, I've always loved God, but with all my heart, with every breath, with all of me, that seems impossible. I don't know if I can do that. It seems too big. As soon as I said it seems too big, I heard Deuteronomy 30. I went to Deuteronomy 30, and it says, this thing is not too big for you, nor is it out of reach. You know, it's not in the heavens that you have to go get it and have someone bring it down to hear it so that you may observe it. You know, it's not across the ocean that you have to go get someone to cross it and so you can bring it back and hear it and observe it. But it's in your mouth and in your heart that you may observe it. And I go, okay, the power of the tongue. Our words, you know, Proverbs 18, life and death are in the power of the tongue. And so, but I really felt, God said it's in your heart and in your mouth that you may observe it. So I was on the bed and I started going, God, I love you with all my heart. I love you with all my strength. I love you with all my mind. And I could feel God's presence coming in. All of a sudden, Satan spoke to me and he goes, no, you don't. You're lying. And lying was my pet peeve. Lying was the thing I hated the most. So he knew what to hit me with, you know, and I stopped. Oh my gosh, I do hate lying. And then all of a sudden I said, no, I'm not lying. I'm being obedient. And I started just more and more. And I said, God, I love you with all my heart. I love you with all my mind. I love you with all my strength. God's presence came into that room and onto me. It was so holy. It was so righteous that my heartbeat slowed down. My thought life became still. And I knew that I was in his heart and not in his presence. I was in his heart. And he spoke to me and he said, ask me whatever you will. And Jim and I had needed something for like 10 years that we'd been praying for. And so I asked for it. 3 days later, we had been praying for years for this. 3 days later, I had it. 3 days later. And I said, God, that's really cool, but can you show me that in the Word? And he took me to John 15. If you abide in me and I abide in you, ask whatever you will, and it shall be given to you. And how do we show God that we love him? If you love me, obey my commandments. In the Old Testament, it's a command. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. In the New Testament, it's, if you love me, you'll obey me. And there's a correlation, and that's why obedience has become so important to our family. But the power of God and of his word and of his love and obeying his commandments, you know, ask whatever you will and it shall be given unto you. But the presence of God, you know. So anyway, I love you guys. Do you guys have any questions about it, or are we good? Are we good? We look good? Okay, we can talk later. But